thank you all for coming. I know there's a lot of competition here right now, and I hope you got to see our little brief, quick lightning flash session on the big stage with Michael Blum from UCSF. So you guys, I think, are in for a treat. I know I feel that way with the people that we have assembled here. And what we've done in this session, it's something I've talked to Matt Holden and Indu Subbiah about forever, and we do occasionally actually get this into the program, but it's this idea of what I call fusion, the fusion of health, IT, and biomedicine. And I'm a journalist, and I report on all these different spaces, and I kind of have this nice perch that's fairly high up altitude. And I can see the connections that are happening in ways that sometimes people in silos don't see. And it's just a perk of what I get to do. But I think that we need to work very, very hard to break down these silos, to especially to almost rethink how each of us approaches what we're doing. And, like they used to say, walk a mile in the other man's or the other woman's moccasin. And so that's what this session is really about. And I'm going to give a quick, kind of slightly fun overview, because I get to do that as a journalist and a writer, and talk about this idea of the fusion of health, IT, and biomedicine. And especially for this group here that is mostly dealing on the business side, although obviously dealing in a lot of other wonderful ways as well. I always tell people the technologies that we're talking about here are absolutely extraordinary. I don't know about you all, but the last 3 days, it kind of leaves your head spinning how quickly we move with all the different ways that we can reshape medicine and healthcare, how we live. But if that doesn't get you, then think about the money. We're talking about right now, if you combine these three markets, consumer health, health IT, and biomedicine, of course biomedicine is a big one, you're talking about approaching $4 trillion. And that's the second largest expenditure on the planet right now. I don't know if you know what the first one would be. It's the United States government, which is at $4 trillion. So we have a gigantic opportunity here, I think, for people that want to combine these markets. And basically, this idea of fusion that I'm talking about, it's all about innovation and efficiency, saving lives, hurdles to overcome, and this is obviously pulled from a normal talk that I give, but I tend to talk to both biomedicine and IT audiences, and almost need to address them individually on what they're looking for. In biomedicine, how they're all they're not terrified, but they certainly know that things are changing and disruption is coming. In health IT, is this perception, as Michael and I talked about on the stage, of this resistance factor. And that kind of ranges in response in the IT community from they don't get it to, how do we work with them? So that's what we're talking about here. And just as a little aside here, I wanted to mention a story that I just wrote that's sort of somewhat the beginnings, kernels of this session, which was called Biologists Are from Mars and Engineers Are from Venus. And this is, again, my perception anyway of the philosophical differences. And I just put up a little picture of Mars and Venus. And some of the notions here, just to wrap around on this philosophical question, which is, engineers fundamentally create machines, which is very different from biologists who work with a machine, if you will, the human body, other organisms that evolution has created. So those are two very, very different, distinct things that we need to wrap around, that each side needs to understand. Also, engineers, there's this mentality. When I say engineers, I'm talking about the IT world, but it's all about fail fast, take risks, low barriers to entry, all these other kind of buzzwords that we hear all the time. Whereas for biologists, they move slowly. You've got lives at stake. They're regulated. They have massive investments that are needed, even on the IT side, to really make everything happen. And this couldn't have been characterized better than a discussion I had recently at one of our ARC events, which I'll tell you about in a second, with Vinod Khosla and Dean Ornish. And we had Vinod basically saying that the human body is a lot like a computer. That's really what he was saying. And then Dean Ornish, a physician, on the biology side, saying, what? If all we were a bunch of algorithms, we could just simply, be replaced by a phone app. And then Dean said something really wonderful, which kind of characterizes this wonderful discussion, which is, I think we violently agree. as they were sort of arguing. And then just a touch about ARC here. This is a new organization. Robin works with me on this, and we have a whole team that's trying to basically reshape this argument in our own small way. We're convening meetings, we're setting up a community which we'd love for you all to join from these three areas, health, IT, and biomedicine, and trying to really create what we call this age of fusion. And we have various things we're doing. We hold events. We're having a media site that's about to launch and programs to have workshops, and these are kind of some of the fun things, some of the speakers, some of the topics we do. And there's some more information at arcprograms.net. So with that, a little introduction here to what we're doing. The format here is each of our amazing speakers are going to talk for a few minutes, and we've got Robin Farmian is going to talk about the patient perspective. Linda Avey, who many of you know from 23andMe and Curious, is going to talk about what it's like being on the IT side dealing with biomedical industry. And then we have a couple guys from the biomedical side, Michael Blum and Atul Butte from UCSF. And so with no further ado, Robin.
Bring it down to my level. So yes, I'm Robin Farmian. I am the Senior Vice President here at ARC Programs. Now, my background is I'm a serial entrepreneur, worked at over 10 early stage startup companies, everything from EMRs to genetic testing to being one of the founders of Exponential Medicine, which is a conference for physicians that talks about the next 5 to 10 years in technology and how that's disrupting medicine. Now, why I became an entrepreneur is because I'm a chronic disease patient. When I was a teenager, I was actually misdiagnosed with an autoimmune disease, ended up resulting in 43 hospitalizations, 6 major surgeries, and it ended up taking out 3 organs. This was all for a misdiagnosis. About 13 years in, and a huge thank you to UCSF, 13 years into my misdiagnosis, and I had been about 2 years as a shut-in, UCSF diagnosed me correctly, put me on a medication called Remicade, and my life literally changed overnight. Within 24 hours, I went back to being someone who could work 4 different jobs and hold down, everything. So I wanted to come up here and really tell you about the patient perspective, because a lot of health IT, while it is amazing, right, I suddenly have access to information, and had this happened in 1991 when I had my surgeries, I probably would not have lost 3 organs if I had the type of information I have with health IT now. But the thing that they're forgetting with patients is that as a chronic disease patient, putting something on my body is actually a big deal. I'm used to being in a hospital bed with IVs and catheters and tubes and pulse oximeters and blood pressure cuffs, and to put one more thing on my body, like an iWatch, is actually a big deal. I don't want it on my body. Also, I'm in pretty severe pain 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so I make sure that I wear very loose clothing, everything is super comfortable. Again, to have any type of constraint is a big deal. So I want that data, but I want it to be seamless and effortless. I want it to do something like, subcutaneous or maybe epidermal electronics. I want it to be Bluetooth enabled, and I want it to be on a platform that aggregates the data where I don't have to actually input anything. Because especially when you are, a chronic disease patient, your world revolves around being sick. Right? So the biggest thing you want to do is get away from that. You want to make sure that you are concentrating on things other than your actual disease. So if I have an app which is, going to track lots of different things and be fun, I don't want to input things. It is actually a big deal to spend that 5 or 10 minutes to input any type of information. It needs to be seamless. And then when it aggregates it, I need it to come up and give me an answer, not just a stream of data. And that's a really big deal.
Thank you, Robin. It's hard to believe that she has those conditions with the energy level she has. I would love her to be completely well, but I think I'd be almost scared, given the level of energy she has right now. So our next speaker is Linda Avey.
Hi, it's great to be here. Thanks everybody for coming. And I have to say, in prepping some comments for this meeting, I actually really love the name of the meeting of being Health 2.0, and kind of in this world we're living in now where we've got this new precision medicine movement, and there's a lot of focus on medicine. I think we really are losing a lot of the movement that's going on in the patient or the consumer world that is focused more on wellness and health, and how can we move the needle more in that direction. But because I was asked to talk about how we can work with the biomedical community, I'll just have a few comments there. Having spent about 25 years in working with that world, whether it's on the academic side or the biopharmaceutical development side, there's a lot of tricks, I think, to being able to interface with that world. You want to get in quickly if you have a product or something that you're trying to sell into a biomedical research lab, for example. It doesn't take that long to figure out if there's a fit. And if there is a fit, it's great. But if it's not, you really do need to cut and run, kind of like the engineering perspective, that you don't want to waste anyone's time. And I think the more you can really listen to what the goals are of the biomedical researcher, I think it can become very clear whether or not there is a fit there. And that's really important. But I think the bigger issue really, though, is that, especially on the academic side, and this is no diss on my co-panelists, but as long as the model stays the same, where publishing is one of the biggest goals, and getting funding and getting into the NIH system, that's really broken. And I think they'd probably agree with me that that's one of the bigger issues that we're facing. And so I think that's why some of us who look at it from the outside in have decided that we want to try new models to do things in a little bit different way, that we can approach it and not get stuck in that same paradigm. And so that was certainly the incentive for starting 23andMe. I had been working in the genetics research and instrumentation field for many years and kept seeing the same problem over and over. We couldn't get enough people enrolled in studies, and we couldn't get NIH grants big enough to really fund powerful studies. So that model was kind of a new way to come at that. And now with 1 million people in the database and clearly some ability to do some amazing research, it's not going to replace the system that we have, but it can be very complementary. But then also on more the wellness side, I think what we're seeing is a lot of patients, and now I'm talking about biomedicine in the clinical perspective, where a lot of patients are just taking this on their own, and especially people with autoimmune conditions and who are struggling to find answers about their own state of health. I wouldn't even necessarily call it a disease perhaps. There might be other ways to put labels on these things, but we're seeing patient communities coming together and sharing with each other and comparing notes and starting to track things. And the more passively these things can be tracked, the better. I have a ring that I wear now that tracks my sleep every night and my steps during the day. They're actually going to be presenting here. It's a Finnish company called Aura. But I wake up in the morning and I run to my phone to see how I slept. And it's a really interesting indicator of what's going on in my personal life. But will I ever share this with my doctor? It's questionable whether my doctor would even want to hear about the sleep and the how much deep sleep I'm getting versus my REM sleep. But I think one story that really highlights this movement is there's a very famous designer in New York City who I won't even say her name because she's from the 70s, so most of you wouldn't know who she is. But anyway, she's really been trying to optimize her health, and she's finally gotten to a point in her 70s where she feels fabulous, and she just feels everything is in the right place. So she went to her physician and said, I want to measure where I am right now. I want to do my microbiome, maybe my gene expression profiling. And she kind of rattled off all these things to her doctor, and her doctor just said, sorry, I can't do that. And so it kind of was a conversation around wellness, but it actually couldn't be conducted in a doctor's office. So I think that's really what's going to happen is we're going to see consumers taking more charge of their own care. They're going to really try to identify how they feel better, whether it's their diet, their sleep, or their exercise, or whatever, supplements. There's a lot of stuff that we probably will have to do on our own. And then at the appropriate time, we can take that information into our doctors and say, look, I've been tracking my blood pressure for 2 months. Here's what it looks like. Here's the trend. And then have a conversation based on that. It's a lot different than bringing your genetic information in, which a lot of doctors just don't recognize it and aren't familiar with it. But I think there's just a huge opportunity, and it's really exciting to see things like Michael and Atul are doing at UCSF, where I think they're going to really be opening up the gates to this information from consumers. So I think it's a very exciting time, and I think the smart people on the biomedical side are going to be ready for it.
Great, thank you, Linda. And it is sort of hard to believe. Linda and I go back pretty far on the genetic testing side, and how we really have only moved incrementally with all this great potential data in genetics that still needs to be interpreted. And I want one of those rings. So we have next up Michael Blum, and I'm going to have to switch slides here, so give me just a second.
So it doesn't matter if the engineers are from Mars or Venus, because I get to be the healthcare guy, and I was trained as an engineer previously. So I live in both, so I'm an earthling. Gotcha.
That's where we converge.
Right, exactly. I'm going to go through these slides pretty quickly, give you a sense of what we're doing at UCSF. A couple of thoughts, though, because what Linda was saying really resonates. There's this fundamental shift, and we look at it as it's a technology thing. There's this convergence of data, but there's also this issue that's going on of the concept of health and wellness versus medicine. And there's a discussion as to whether those two are different things, and the people who've been doing medicine for all these years should just get out of the way and let people figure out wellness. I think that's probably the wrong discussion, because we need to understand from a scientific perspective what it actually is. Otherwise, we're going to be guessing about both. And that's where I come from, which is that meld of engineer and physician and scientist is when we guess at things, or we do, N of less than one experiments, we end up getting anecdotes that almost invariably drive us to the wrong place, because they're frequently not generalizable and do result, especially if they're propagated by a very powerful speaker who's very compelling, can lead people to really make incorrect conclusions. And it would be really a shame if we lost this opportunity to really learn so much more about ourselves than we've learned about disease over the last 50 years. We need to learn much more than that about what wellness is, what wellness preservation is, and getting away from this concept of, well, here's my genetic information, and here's my gene expression information, and tell me how to remain well. Well, you know how to remain well because you got yourself well, and you can kind of work around that and figure out what works for you, and then combining that knowledge with how we treat the disease when we get there. So let me just jump right in. These are the reasons I do this. The guy on the left is a very healthy 40-year-old guy, but his dad died of a heart attack when he was very young, so he didn't have a dad growing up, and he just had his first kid, and his wife sends him in to me as a cardiologist and says, don't let that happen to me, keep me healthy. And he says, what do I need to do? Should I be taking statins, cholesterol drugs for the rest of my life because my dad had a heart attack when I was young? And this can go one of two ways. If he's got the same profile and looks a lot like his dad, so he probably has those risk genetics, then yes, he does. But it turned out that his dad was obese, his dad smoked, his dad didn't look like that and didn't exercise. So I don't know what to tell him, right? Because all we have is very gross markers that say, well, dad dying, before 40, really powerful risk factor. You don't want to end up there. So we don't have the data yet for me to answer his question. The guy on the right is a grandfather who had presented and had a horrible heart attack, developed heart failure afterwards. And 15 years ago, that guy's dead in 2 years. Well, now it's 8 years later, and he's doing really well, loving his time with his grandchildren, so thankful for that. But he takes 6 medicines a day, and he hates it. And he says, can I stop taking these? And I said, dude, 10 years ago, you're dead already. Love the fact that you're getting to take these medicines because you're alive, you're active, you're loving life. He said, no, but they make me feel awful. I was like, well, which is worse, dead awful or not feeling so bad, And he said, well, can't we figure out which ones I shouldn't be taking? And I say, all I can say to him is, well, here's the literature. It says that all of these make you do better. We don't know which make you do more better. We don't know which ones you can stop. And what we do know is different ethnicities do differently depending on which of these medicines they're taking. So there's something in there, but we don't know yet, so I can't advise you. And that's not a really good place to be. So where we are is we're still in imprecise medicine, and we need to get to precision medicine. As much as we don't want to talk about medicine, we want to talk about health. It's going to happen, right? Even if people are healthy, at some point you're not going to be healthy. You're going to need this stuff. So we need to figure out what's the best way to do it. And at UCSF, we talk a lot about precision medicine in this platform. This platform is all about huge data sets, which is why we're here talking about new sensors, new technologies, new data aggregations, new databases. And Atul will talk about a lot of this as we go forward, so I'm going to skip that stuff. Digital health is key to this. The patient side, the patient presenting all this data is what's fundamentally going to change it, getting data from healthy people instead of the old style that Linda was talking about where we have clinical trials. We can't get them in. How do we do all this? We're going to need huge new data sets, and that's where digital health is going to play. You guys have all seen these. You're all very familiar with the multitude of sensors, the connected everything that's really changing it and enabling this huge revolution that we're seeing. So where we're going to get to is we need electronic health record data, we need data from your healthy life, we need all that stuff coming in as sensors combined with the omics data, not just your full genome, but the expression, your microbiome. All this data needs to come together with very powerful analytic tools. We are not there yet. A lot of companies that you'll hear out there are already telling you they understand this data, they have this data, they can do predictive models on it. Still, a lot of Luftmensch talk going on there. That stuff is not there yet. We don't have clinically care-driven predictive models that can tell you how you're going to do yet. We're very early in that space. We're getting much better with claims-side data, figuring out who at-risk populations are, figuring out who's going to be a big consumer of care, but getting to the point where we can tell you what's going to happen to you over a disease course, we're still not there yet. Again, don't need to tell you guys about this huge investments. They've talked about this already. This space is here to stay. The Fitbit IPO was impressive, but more impressive is that the president wears one while he's talking to the nation. But equally interesting is that the guy who wrote this article says, I hate Fitbit as a company, as an investment. So we're in this time of huge excitement, huge popularity, huge opportunity, but we have to be careful that we really keep our eye on the ball and that we don't get into too much hype before the whole thing comes crashing down. We've got to show how these things are really going to benefit people, get past the wear this and do 10,000 steps and all will be well, to really much deeper, much more sophisticated analytics and understanding of wellness that can really prevent disease, keep people happy, keep people well, but then once they do transition and show up in our offices, that we can have those much more intelligent conversations with them and give them much more information. I'll end with this. This is what I see in the office all the time. People come up from Silicon Valley. Hey, I invented this incredibly cool new sensor. It's Bluetooth enabled. It zips to your iPhone, and from your iPhone, it zips right to your doctor who's sitting there waiting for this information. Someone is delusional, right? Because this is what it looks like. All the beginning part's true, goes up to the cloud, and that's what your doctor looks like, pulling his hair out or her hair out because they have too much data, they're totally overwhelmed, and that is not helpful. So there's the story, the Apple Health Kit gets this data into the electronic health record. That is not integration. That's not really getting us where we need to go. We need to be far more sophisticated than that, and that's what the Center for Digital Health Innovation at UCSF is all about. We have 4 pillars of work: innovation internally and externally, validating all this stuff. I talked a little bit about that before, and we'll talk more about that as we get into it. A lot of these sensors are not validated. There's data being used for the wrong purpose that gives you bad answers, and then there's bad data that just is always going to give you a bad answer. And I can tell you, a lot of the validation that we do on these devices, they are not what's being sold. Integration into care processes and wellness processes, not just dump it into the record and everyone will be fine. That doesn't work. It's got to be in a care process. And then educating the next generation of clinicians is what we're all about. So I'll stop there. We'll take more questions. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Michael. And by the way, we will have time for you guys to ask some questions here in a minute. Atul Butte from UCSF.
I'm here also representing the biomedical enterprise, especially the academics. And so we have this challenge that we shouldn't just be writing papers. We should actually be doing something more than just writing papers. I'm just going to give you a couple anecdotes. And I know you're also kind of wondering, what can you do to help the biomedical research enterprise, or let's say the healthcare enterprise? I'm going to frame this talk as to asking us, what can we do for you? And in particular, we do see a lot of patients, we do make a lot of measurements, we do a lot of research measurements, and what can you do with all of that data to actually take it to the next level in terms of entrepreneurship? So I'm just going to give a couple anecdotes like that. We are in this data deluge right now. So Michael started to talk about that, and I'll go into more depth. I think we definitely have these kinds of nifty gadgets. A lot of them are molecular, a lot of them are clinical. On the molecular side, we are entering this era of genome sequencing. The first genome cost $3 billion and took 13 years in factories like the one in the bottom left. And we're rapidly heading towards USB sequencers, USB stick sequencers. The record right now is 26 hours from actual DNA to entire genome sequence. These are newborns that are sick, so you can get genome sequence and interpret that pretty quickly. That's down from 13 years. And that's down. That is down in less than 10 years to make that kind of trajectory. And it costs about $1,500 if you want your genome done, plus or minus different pieces and things. So it's a no-brainer. This is going to impact medicine. You probably already see exam rooms with computers in them now, right? We've kind of got that part. And they all have USB sticks. I'm not saying there's going to be a sequencer in every room, but you can imagine every clinic is going to have something to do with sequencing. It's a no-brainer. We're going to have these measurements. I like these kind of research measurements. I'm a fan of this company because my first project 15 years ago involved this. This is a company called Affymetrix, which is actually right down the road here, where you can put any sample on these kinds of chips, and you can measure every gene, every recipe in those cells. What are they cooking up? A little bit of this, a little bit of that. Is it a cancer cell? Is it a diabetes cell? And you can just make a measurement of everything that's going on in those tissues. These are so cheap now, I carry them in my briefcase, right? So here's one of them in my hand. You can just see big data comes from small packages, just like this. And then when you get tired of measuring them one by one, you can measure them 96 at a time. So you see the 96 well format, and those are now so cheap, I can carry that in my briefcase. And then when you get tired of measuring those, you can measure them 384 at a time, and that's what this looks like, right? This is exponential growth in life science, right? I can visually show you exponential growth here, right? From 1 to 96 to 384. We're drowning in this data. In fact, we collect a lot of it, we write papers, we deposit the data on the internet, so much data that as of 2012, we got 1 million of these chips publicly available. We give away, actually now it's closer to 2 million of these samples. Someone wrote a paper about it, someone released the data, and it's just waiting for you to do something with this data. No one else is going to look at this data again. They're just depositing more. And what kind of things can you do with this kind of data? Well, so many people study diseases, so many people study drugs and health and all these different conditions that you're interested in, and the data just sits there. One of the things that we've realized is that, if people are studying diseases and people are studying drugs, why don't we kind of put those two together to figure out maybe here's a drug that might treat a particular disease. My favorite example is this one, where we figured out that this antidepressant, this drug for depression, melts away lung cancer, small cell lung cancer, right? It's a mouse that has lung cancer. Humans smoke to get lung cancer. This mouse, you knock out those kind of genes and it gets its own lung cancer. This antidepressant melts away lung cancer. Why I love this one is because we went from public data, right, kind of valueless data. We showed this drug should work computationally. We get the cell lines in a petri dish. I'm not going to show you that, but this mouse seems to get better. And 15 months after the computer prediction, we launch a clinical trial on this, right? Total cost of the trial, $50,000, not even $1 million, not even $100,000, because the drug's already in the pharmacy. And that's the new way we can do this, right? Drug companies on the cheap, garage biotechs, right? Garage biotechs. The same way we can write apps in a garage. Why can't we do this in a garage? Because actually we can. The data's out there, the animal models, you can do all of this. We're in Silicon Valley, so you got to start a company on this, right? So this is one of the companies I'll talk about, NewMedi. Obviously, I'm a founder to this, and I'm particularly proud of this company because really it's a team of like 3 or 4 people now, a lot of consultants, a lot of outsourcing, and just a couple of days ago, they announced this deal with Allergan, the #1 specialty pharmaceutical company. And so NewMedi, with a small team, can make drugs like that. So that's on the drug side. The data's there, just waiting for you. We can't do them all here. On the diagnostic side, we can use that kind of data for diagnostics. My favorite story is this one, preeclampsia. Any of you have heard of this disease? Yeah, the only hands go up are the people who watch Downton Abbey because one of the characters dies of eclampsia. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen it. Otherwise, most Americans don't even know this disease, right? It's still how husbands lose wives. The blood pressure shoots up during pregnancy, and then, this disease falls between the cracks like a lot of diseases. Obstetricians, they say, well, take the baby out. The mom's going to be fine. But then we pediatricians have to deal with this baby, keeping the baby alive for weeks until they're kind of old enough to leave the hospital. And we don't have a prognostic. We can't even tell which mom's going to get this, which pregnant woman's going to. We don't even have a good diagnostic. Like, is it happening in front of us? We realize all this data is available. We turn our crank. We got a whole bunch of ideas. And even that then becomes a diagnostic. We test it. The samples are available in all the hospitals around you, right? You can work with the hospitals to get these kinds of cohorts. Of course, you got to spin out a company. And this one I'm in particular proud of. This was a one-man company we launched. We got seed financing, we got $2 million. And just 4 months ago, this company got acquired already. So we went from public data to acquisition of the company in 24 months. Jobs created along the way, whole bunch of entrepreneurs now realizing they can do more of this. And there's a multi-center trial going on. I don't know if these drugs and things are going to work, but the science now for us in academia continues in the startup companies, right? Funded by private dollars. But we can do more of these. You can do more of these because we're drowning in all the different data sets out there, whether it's EMR data, pharmacology data, Fitbits, microbiomes, and all the rest. You can't even put them all on the slide. So in the last minute, why am I excited right now? Because I get to build out a couple new things. I was at Stanford for 10 years. I just moved to UCSF 10 weeks ago. I'm excited because I get to build out this new Institute of Computational Health Sciences. We're kind of slumming it out in that brand new building in Mission Bay until they build our brand new building in Mission Bay right next to you now, the Warriors Stadium. You may love or hate that concept, but it's going to be next to the Warriors Stadium. I think they're going to actually build this thing. And that's kind of cool and exciting. I get to hire a bunch of faculty. But the fun part is actually we are also playing a coordinating role to organize electronic medical record data across all 5 University of California campuses. So that's UCSF, UCLA, San Diego, Irvine, and Davis. We've got to do this in a secure, private way. Of course, we've got to think about who people opting in and opting out. But what can you do when we got 12, 13 million patients? That's 4%. 4% of the US population gets their care in the University of California. And what can we do when we kind of can cooperate about things, right? So imagine like 5 natural experiments. All 5 institutions think they're doing something right in keeping people healthy or taking care of sick people, but maybe in a data-driven way, we can kind of learn from 3 and teach the other 2, or learn from 1 and teach the other 4, right? Data-driven learning healthcare system, that's the buzzword. And I'm also proud because I get to represent the California effort in this. California, as usual, is way ahead of the rest of the country in investing. We all know President Obama mentioned precision medicine earlier this year, but Governor Brown mentioned it a year prior to Obama in the State of the State address back in 2014. That led to $3 million. It's a modest amount of money to get started, but the state itself is investing in precision medicine. That's a good thing. Now, $3 million, maybe we can add some zeros to that as we go along. We're going to work to see if we can keep it at least going and maybe increasing. But it's kind of amazing that our state government gets this enough to put some dollars down to keep this investment going, not just to the UCs, but to other universities and a whole bunch of entrepreneurs and biotechs getting funding with these pilot projects. So it's an exciting time to be in this space, and the academic role in that biomedical enterprise is there to help you too. With that, I'll sit down.
Great, thank you, Atul. And by the way, if you're interested in that state initiative, I think Elizabeth Baca is here. Yes, you can talk to her about that. So you can see why this is so exciting, right? And how many times did Atul say and others, this is an open, planet, if you will, go back to that analogy, or mini planets, a whole solar system for you guys to work in. And, there's so much opportunity. And it can work like the IT model where, as he said, some of these companies start quick. They move in 24 months to an IPO or an acquisition. Yes. Many of them will take longer, as Michael said, but the opportunities are really there if you step aside for a moment and talk to these guys. I mean, this is why I wanted them to come to Health 2.0, because they're really reaching out. And these are, as you can see, enormous enterprises, multi-billion-dollar, millions and millions of people just here in California. Never mind the rest of the country. So we, unfortunately, this is not a very long session. I'm going to ask these guys for a very quick question, sort of, maybe a line or two, and then I'm going to open it up for you all just in the last few minutes. So my question for you is, from your perspective, so we've got different perspectives here, if 10 is full convergence, let's go 1 to 10, how close do you think we are to that magical moment that we would all like to hit, where it's not delusional, where actually the doctor is getting something that he needs, or we're all working together? So maybe on a 1 to 10, and maybe a sentence or two on why that is. Robin?
I think it would be about a 2 right now. We are still in its infancy when you're not able to get the amount of data that you want as a patient. You're not able to get the results or the answers yet that you need.
I'd say probably a 1.5, and approximately, because it's really, I think there's a lot going on outside the medical system, and we just haven't really figured out how to pull that information into our medical records. I think there's a lot of hope for that, which we want to experiment. It's so great that we have UCSF here locally to start to do that, but it's very, very early.
So I'll take the unusual role of being more optimistic than you guys are. I'll say that we're a 3 moving to a 4, to steal the phrase, it's not the beginning of the end, but it's the end of the beginning. We're seeing stuff Atul talked about. We're setting up a remote diagnostic hypertension clinic that's going to be automated with algorithms in the clinic. So we're past the frustrations of it, but we still have a long way to go.
What number would you give? Oh, you said 3, sorry. I missed that.
3.275. 3.14?
More or less, yes, okay.
But I just want to say that I love this because, but are you saying that's UCSF or is that global?
All right, I'll revise my trend downward a little bit. So I think globally, we suffer from the Silicon Valley, California thing. I mean, so if you're in big cities, it's definitely, wherever you go in the big cities and the big centers, it's moving forward. We're always, 5 years ahead of where, the different parts of the country and globally are.
I mean, so how do I answer that in one line? I mean, I think, to me, the model for integration right now, you might like it or hate it, is this thing called Mint. I don't know how many people use Mint to kind of track your, God, that stuff just works magically, and it even gives me advice. If that's a 10, I think probably like 1 or 2 right now, sadly. And again, we're probably ahead at UCSF, but I think 1 or 2.
Okay, so a lot to do, folks, and the next 5 minutes or so, do we have questions? We'll just start over here.
Yeah, so the question is, what do you need? Just to repeat the question. Silicon Valley is ready to address it now. We think it's pretty bad. What do you need? So I'll say, actually, sometimes Silicon Valley responds that way, right? But a lot of times people will start with, here's a cool platform. Let me see if there's something I can do with this. And I think we kind of have to get out of that mindset to get into the deeper mindset where, we don't need another picture to take pictures. We don't need another app to take pictures of moles, okay? We kind of got that one. We can now share pictures of moles, okay? Adherence, where do I find the cheapest drug? I mean, we have a lot of those superficial things now. Go deeper, but it means learning a lot more about health and medicine and biomedicine to go deeper. It's worth learning more. Get the experts around you to learn more, and then figure out the unmet need. But I think you got to go what I guess you would call verticals, right? You're not going to solve every biomedical problem simultaneously, especially if you've been thinking a platform, or solve sleep, solve cancer, solve that kind of cancer. I mean, solve a couple of these, and then broaden out from there. That would be my strategy.
It's a little bit of a question, but the what do we need probably has 1,000 different answers. I would, at a very high level, we need partnerships with people coming out of Silicon Valley. I don't need more people coming into my office saying, hey, I have this great consumer app, shove it into healthcare because it's fixed. This technology fixes things. Technologies don't fix things. Technologies are enablers that might solve a problem, but it's the engineers versus, so we need to change the mindset a little bit. So at the Center for Digital Health Innovation, I need to be freestanding. I need to be revenue positive for the organization. When someone comes up and says, well, you're an academic, you're NIH funded, you're supposed to do this for us. You're supposed to prove that this works for us. We're not so interested. Partnerships where you've got something, we've got something, and we both really believe that our whys, why we're doing this, resonate, then those kind of partnerships work for everyone and we can do great things. So more thinking like partners and starting from why you're doing this than from I got this great technology.
Yeah, just a couple more quick questions. Unfortunately, they didn't give us a lot of time here. And by the way, you guys want to do a bigger workshop? We're talking about doing a series of sessions at maybe another Health 2.0 event. Let's go in the back there. Quick answer, somebody?
Yeah, I gotta thank you for the softball. So very unpopular answer, but I think HIEs are a huge waste of money that is costing the system time and money. HIEs are a bad excuse because we don't have a national patient identifier. That's what we need. We need this country to stop. We need, standards, but a standard national patient identifier. It's a number. It's everyone. So we've been driven by a very fringe privacy advocacy group. I understand. I totally subscribe to we need to have privacy protections, but we cannot continue to function effectively without a national patient identifier, the standards that go with it, that would eliminate the billions and billions of dollars that are spent trying to work around that by building HIEs. We're working on a health interoperability platform that will talk to the different EHRs, different apps, things like that. But again, we'll have to bolt on, master patient indexes and HIE to that, which is all waste of money. That's where one of the biggest starts would be, is moving to getting people around. You can have a national patient identifier, still have privacy and safety along with it. So I don't get enamored with the size or the volumes of data that people are getting very excited about. I think that is a business and engineering marketing driver to try to confuse the picture of, well, we need to do this because things are so big, they're so complex. You can have small amounts of data that could be critically important that could come with people. So I don't know, that whole piece of it, it's your healthy life. We don't really fundamentally understand the data that's coming out of your regular life. That's where we need to start, because we're going to be able to see the signals. They're going to be these non-traditional vital signs that we're going to learn about that are going to give us clues that'll be built into the prediction models. So it's a big discussion, love to have it separately, but I think the whole thing of we're Watson and we can process a gazillion metaflops of who knows what are like, so what, you know? So.
Okay, unfortunately, I think we're running over even a couple minutes here. So can you guys stick around for a few minutes if people want to come up and have more questions? And Matt Holt just walked in, and I asked everybody if they wanted to have a workshop or something around this, and we seem to have an affirmative there, so maybe next time we can do that. Anyway, thank you guys.
Robin, get organizing.
Yeah, Robin?
I will do it.
She's actually done already.
It's done. It was done when everybody said yes. And, appreciate you all coming. Check out arcprograms.net. We'd love to get you all involved with that and come to some of our events. Health 2.0 is one of our co-organizers. So thank you guys very much. I really appreciate it.